Artists have many diverse and intriguing skills, but for all the things we put tremendous amounts of time into, we often neglect ourselves. It's hard to quantify, of course. You don't have another drawing to show for taking care of your body, and you don't have a completed sketchbook to show for tending to your mental health. In this episode, we are going to explore essential ways to take care of yourself as an artist, to tend to your body, your mind, and perhaps even your artistic soul. What is self-care for an artist? Let's define it as such, at least for today. Artistic self-care is the intentional and holistic practices artists engage in to nurture their mental, emotional, and physical well-being. These are often outside of traditional artistic practices and are tailored to support the individual's overall health and sustained creativity. Sounds good enough, but why is it needed? As I mentioned in the intro, we have a nasty habit of either focusing most of our energy into our art practices and other things, and neglecting ourselves. Sometimes this comes from a terrible place where we believe we don't deserve the care. We haven't earned it, perhaps. If only we had finished that project or we had gotten to a certain level of skill, then maybe we would earn a break. Sometimes it is simply negligence or arrogance, assuming we can make it through. I don't need sleep, I just need to finish this project. We are a strange batch of creatures, but in my 11 years of working with middle and high school students, and the great many more years of being an artist and coming into and out of many artistic circles, this is a near universal concern for us. So what does this look like? How do we as artists take care of ourselves? And how do we help those in our lives who are creatives as well, who are other artists who don't take care of themselves? What kind of advice and feedback can we give? Let's start simple. Taking breaks. This might seem like the most counterintuitive thing to do when you are focused on your artwork. The reality is, however, we are human. We are biological machines and we break down if we do the same thing too much. Perhaps one of the best things we can do to lengthen a drawing session is to get up, move around, get another cup of coffee, and then sit back down and get to work. Maybe consider going on a short walk. If you live somewhere you can get outside and the temperature is not prohibitive, getting outside can do wonders for your mind and body. I like the cold, so winter is hardly going to bother me in that regard, but we are also fortunate living in Colorado. We have many 50 and 60 degree days in the middle of winter. That's Fahrenheit, by the way, otherwise it would be a little bit nuts. Take short breaks. Find whatever your rhythm is. For me, it's about every hour. I need to get up for just a few minutes. I usually try to limit my breaks to 10 minutes and try to go far less than that. It's time for the bathroom, for refilling water or coffee or petting the dog. The critters need love too, just like you do. Especially if they aren't allowed in your studio anymore because they eat your brushes. And again, it's understandable if the idea of taking a break is strange to you. It is literally a break from your work, a break from progress or moving toward finishing the assignment or the project that you're on. But when you take little breaks and you stagger those break times throughout a large quantity of work time over the course of a day or even a week, it allows you to stick to the thing for longer. And that's the goal, right? Is to stick to our art for a long period of time and to continue to enjoy it as we move through it. As odd as it is, taking breaks can make the time actually spent creating far more fruitful. And we all want that growth, don't we? Mindfulness is our next thing to talk about. This can be a trite thing to say, but here are some of the particulars. First of all, do not assume the status quo has to stay the status quo. Things don't have to be the way they are now. If you are anxious all of the time, tired all the time, or unhappy all of the time when it comes to your art or life in general, do not assume this is normal or that it has to stay this way. Be mindful of your heart rate. As you're working on pieces of artwork, is it causing your heart rate to accelerate? Is it stressful? Is the anxiety from a particular thing a pose that you feel like you have to get correct? A color that you have to mix perfectly? Is that applying enough stress that it's causing your heart rate to increase? Be mindful of what your body tells you. If things start to cramp or a leg starts to fall asleep, your back aches, then it's time to move, to stretch, to get up for a minute. Pay attention to your breathing. I often run into this when I run downstairs to do recordings for videos and podcasts like this. If I try to do the audio recording right after running down the flight of stairs, I'm usually low on breath and then it's very difficult. My breathing is labored. That's a silly little thing, but it's something that I've become cognizant of. And just like heart rate, some people have labored breath when they're stressed or anxious about what they're working on. Make sure your workspace has decent light for your eyes. If you're staring at a screen for a very long time, breaks are important, and you can be mindful of if you're rubbing your eyes a lot, if your eyes are hurting. If you wear glasses, that's just another thing to be cognizant of. But light is also good for us as human beings. Be mindful of your body and your environment. It's too easy to just do what you always do. Sleep. Yes, I know, you have probably heard this 100 times. I spent most of my life not getting enough sleep though. I started working from 4.5 hours of sleep a night in high school, pretty much until I helped found the school that I worked at for a decade. At that point, I bumped it up to a modest 6 hours a night. It wasn't until about 3 years ago, looking into the psychology of learning and how our brains actually take in and store new information, that I realized that our brains really need about 8 hours of sleep to learn new things effectively. This, of course, does not mean that you need to have that much sleep or you're incapable of learning things. I myself am proof of the contrary to that, and probably most of you are as well. However, most research on the topic seems to indicate that having a larger quantity of sleep, 8 hours is kind of the minimum, aids in the acquisition and storage of new knowledge. At that point, when I felt like I was armed with reasonable research, I had enough confirmation to make the switch. Since then, I have tried very hard to make sure I get 8 hours of sleep a night. I do not always succeed. Having a 4.5-year-old is its own manner of chaos, but I probably nail it 5 times a week. It has improved many things tremendously, and so if you are suffering from anxiety, body aches, stress, a lack of an ability to concentrate on your artwork, even things like a lack of inspiration or motivation, sleep is perhaps one of the best things you can look into. And from the research, from people who know far more about this topic than I do, that seems to be the indication as well. Healthy diet is the next thing to look at for artists' self-care. I feel like this goes without saying, and it's another area that artists are notoriously bad about dealing with. Perhaps this is changing in the 2020s, but I feel like I still know a lot of artists who live on ramen, Pop-Tarts, and takeout. Diet is a complex issue, but you probably know what is better for your particular body than anyone else. I try to stay away from carbs, and I keep a ton of fruits around for snacking, along with like a whole roast chicken that I pull apart slowly over the week. I am not going to linger here. There are tons of good resources out there, but if you want to take better care of your artistic self, eating healthily is a great idea. A very apt thing to follow that up with is hydration. Drink more water. This is so simple, but you might be surprised how many ailments, muscle aches, headaches, backaches, other aches are caused by dehydration. I took meds for headaches for years before realizing it was really just the fact that I only drink water during meals. I switched to carrying around a water bottle of some kind with me wherever I am. I don't like drinking water, but if it's there, I kind of keep just sipping on it out of boredom. This is one of those things that probably applies to a lot of people. I think gamers probably run into this as well because we like to sit and do the thing that we do for long periods of time. Many of us sit for periods of over an hour, multiple times a week, working on our artwork. Diving in, our headphones finally set to the ideal video, podcast, or music, and we just go. We're dialed in, we're ready for business. And then we sat there for 3 hours, we get up and we're lightheaded and we fall over because we haven't had anything to drink. Yes, I know it's a simple thing, and maybe I sound like your dad. I'm only a little bit sorry. This is a funny one, but it's important. If you need to take care of yourself, and we all need to take care of ourselves, we can all agree, drink more water, please. Set yourself up with good things to listen to. Now, I just mentioned this a moment ago, and this is not quite as simple as getting some good music. It's about finding the music. Podcasts, videos, whatever that are not distracting for you. They don't pull you out of the experience, and they fit the mood of whatever it is that you're making or creating. This is a very individual thing, but I can give you some examples for me just so you can see that the dichotomy of what I listen to at different points in time might be fairly divergent, and it might be the same for you. When I am writing scripts and outlines like this one, I tend to listen to music I know well, music I do not have to think about. I listen to a lot of progressive rock and instrumental music. It's not distracting to me. The songs are long, I don't have to change them very frequently, and I can focus on what I'm doing. And more importantly, I can focus on thinking through complex ideas, trying to figure out how to put content together, how it meshes, what order it needs to be in. These are things that I can't do if I'm listening to a new band that I just discovered last week. Mostly, this music just blocks out other noises and allows me to focus on my work. When I am working on art, I tend to listen to long-form podcasts and lore. I've been listening to tons of Elden Ring and Dark Souls lore from Smoughtown over the last year. I'll link him in the description below. It's the slow, meandering, and soft accented voices that keep me moving. It makes time feel like it's moving much more quickly. Now, this is most of the time, but there are times where I'll actually turn off the music and just work in silence. This happens in very specific scenarios where I'm working on solving issues. A lot of the time that I work on my art, I'm kind of on autopilot. I'm not really thinking very thoroughly about what I'm doing. But there are times where I'm trying to solve a tough issue. Usually they're anatomical things for me, or sometimes compositional, because those are my biggest struggles. And in those scenarios, I'll often turn everything off and I'll just think about what I'm doing. So keep that in mind as well. When I am writing, I'm often listening to heavy progressive metal. I do not know why. The intense 7-string guitars and weird time signatures are comfortable to me, I guess. It helps me focus, and when an entire album is finished, I know it's been about an hour of work time. So when you sit down to work on whatever your craft is, set yourself up with ideal listening material. Something that is going to serve the greater purpose of you having a successful session. This sounds perhaps a little bit over-focused and overthinking, and it might be. I have a tendency to overanalyze things. But it's these tiny little subtle things that can allow you to take a little bit better care of yourself. Set you up for an art session where you walk away feeling like you were satisfied or you were successful, rather than missing out on your expectations and leaving that session disappointed. That's a really difficult thing for us, and we deal with disappointment frequently. So avoiding even 1% of it is a great way to take care of yourself. Have some hobbies that are outside of your art. If art is all-consuming, and it is for some of us, make sure you have something else to sink time into. This can really be quite varied, and as long as it isn't quote-unquote a waste of time, you will likely be fine. I have way too many hobbies. It is difficult for me to focus on 1 or 2 or 7 things. I just have too many things that I want to do. Right now, I am focused on my art for videos, illustrating, and growth, and also on writing for videos and scripts, but also working on a first draft of my novel. I would consider those my creative focuses right now. After that, my hobbies would be writing music, playing guitar, reading, gardening, cooking. I just started collecting Magic the Gathering cards, building large Lego sets. Man, this stuff makes me sound like a little kid. It's important, though, to have additional things to focus on, both for when you need a break from your artistic creations and for the pure joy the other things bring. Few people are so narrowly focused that they can gain a full satisfaction from life by focusing on a single thing. Diversify where your joy and satisfaction comes from. If you are also the kind of person who feels like you haven't earned this because you haven't pushed hard enough with your art, enjoying your other hobbies can break you away from that and hopefully dismantle that idea that you aren't valid, that you haven't earned downtime, or you don't deserve a break. These are dangerous mindsets, and sometimes just having an additional hobby that you can dedicate some time to can break you away from your art for just a little bit of time. And remember, you need to live a full life, human. You're going to have better art if you take a break from your art and if you do other things that make you excited. Those other things are going to find their way into your art one way or the other, so don't stress about that. Adequate social time. I know, but we need social time. The quantity that we each individually need is quite diverse, but each of us have a reservoir that needs to be filled regularly. I don't think I'm going out on a limb to say most of us are likely introverted, and as such, we need far less social time than the others. However, even if this is true, introverts still need social time, usually one-on-one time with people that truly understand us. Do not neglect this. Don't get so involved in your work that you forget your soul needs to connect with another human soul for the sake of both of you. Now, as you get older, this becomes a little bit trickier in that the social circles don't always exist in the way they did when you were young. The beautiful part is if you are listening to this and you are in high school or college or at university, there's a social circle around you all the time. Now, it might be stressful or difficult to find people that you really interface well with, but that circle exists. As you get older, you have circles in your workplace, but not everyone does. Some workplaces only have several people, some have many that are so different from you that you don't necessarily interface with them, and there are lots of professional workspaces where you just don't have any time to talk, any time to build relationships and friendships. Or you might work from home, in which case, you might not have much of a social circle unless you put lots of time into it. So this does get a little bit more difficult as you get older, but even if it's much more difficult, if you're like me in your mid-30s, it's worth putting time into. Even though it's anxiety-inducing and it's stressful, it's worth putting time into, both for you as a human being, and selfishly it will make your art better, because having more people in your life gives you a diverse set of perspectives and influences. And if you are more extroverted, or at least tend that way, this is even more crucial for you. Make sure you give yourself ample amounts of time around people. Plan ahead, make sure you have plans laid out in advance. You have coffee dates or whatever the kids do these days to get together. Take care of your social needs, human. They are a fundamental part of what it is to be of the human race. Set and maintain good boundaries. Oh man, maybe this point needs to be its own podcast. Let me know below if you would like that, a whole podcast about setting boundaries as an artist. Let's go over a few things here really quickly though. We need to set boundaries about our space, how others interact with it, and what we use it for. I've actually mentioned in the past that if you have an art studio set up and you also are a video gamer, don't have those two spaces be the same. Like, my consoles are not in my studio, so when I sit down to work on my computer, I don't accidentally get tempted to go play Elden Ring or something like that. It's important to have your supplies, your artistic things set apart. If you have a younger sibling or a child in the house, you don't have to let them play with your $3 a piece colored pencils. They don't need to play on your iPad. Your art things can just be your art things. Obviously, as a father of a small child, this is something I deal with. My way of dealing with it has been to make sure my daughter has her own art supplies. And these don't have to be expensive. She just has her own sketchbook, and she has a conglomerate of colored pencils, crayons, and markers. What this has turned into is when I sit down to work either in my studio or upstairs at the dining table, she will often put her stuff aside, grab her sketchbook and her supplies, and come work. And then when my wife walks in the room and tries talking to her, she'll be like, "Mommy, Daddy and I are working right now." Which is A, super cute, and B, it keeps her from sabotaging all of my supplies. So, bonus! Continuing on, your space, if you have a studio, should be sacred, protected from outside sources. Your time is invaluable, and it needs to be protected as well. Sometimes this is just about setting up a particular time each day or week that you work, making sure the other people you live with can leave you alone, or perhaps even staying up late to work when everyone else is asleep. Obviously, still try to get your 8 hours, but sometimes you gotta, move the schedule around a little bit. The other side of time, however, is remembering that just because someone else asked you to make a drawing or a painting for them, that you don't have to do it. Your time and artistic energy is finite and valuable. We often have those close to us ask us to design something, sketch something, paint a portrait of a dog, or something along those lines. People outside of the artistic realm don't really know what they're asking most of the time, which is ironic. And this also means we shouldn't hold it entirely against them. I wouldn't ask a random plumber friend of mine to come work on the pipes beneath my kitchen sink and assume he's going to do it for free on my time in the allotted time that I have. Your art time is valuable, so don't feel bad telling someone no. I don't have the time to do that for you right now. If you are a people pleaser, this is far more difficult. If you need permission to say no, here it is. Not that I feel like I have any ability to give you that permission, but I will. You have the permission to maintain your own time. You get to choose how you spend your time. Time is one of the only resources that we actually have as human beings that is just a part of our existence, a part of our life. We live in the fourth dimension. Your time is yours. So if you need permission to say no, say no. You manage your time. Try to hold on to it as viciously as you possibly can without, being a jerk, because that's just generally not a good idea. Positive self-affirmation. Remember to be kind to yourself. I talk about this a lot, and I hope it's not becoming lame or trite or repetitive. I just think that it's a good idea to have a large quantity of kindness set aside for yourself. And this comes from spending so much time over the last 20-25 years with artists. Not only did I teach them, but I went to art school and I spent all my time with all the weird art kids in high school. It's been a huge part of my life. Artists are not particularly kind to themselves. And I think if you focus on this, most of the time if you realize that you're not being kind to yourself, that alone can help you move towards a more productive place. It doesn't solve the problem, but it can at least make you aware of the problem so that you can start chipping away at it. Give yourself some grace. Things are hard, the art journey is long, all these things that we talk about, that we throw around, the things that we say so wonderfully and quickly to people around us that we don't buy into and believe for ourselves. Give yourself some grace. Find success in the tiny things, in your little wins. Leaf back through old sketchbooks, paintings, whatever it is you work on. Look at your past work and take pleasure in the beauty there, and also just in how far you've come. And remember, sometimes it's just a wonderful thing to sit there and look at a stack of sketchbooks. Maybe everything in them you think is ugly and gross, but hey, you finished them. And finishing things is important and something to be lauded and something to be held on to, especially when you're struggling. Remember that you are more critical of your work than anyone else. In all likelihood, if you hate something, there's a good chance most viewers would be ambivalent toward it. And if you find a piece tolerable, there's probably a dozen people who would gain joy from looking at it. Our perspective on our own work is often ridiculously skewed. Another thing I just want to end off with, I think it's important. If you need counseling, therapy, assistance, or help, seek those things. Watching a video online is not going to take care of all of your needs as a human being. So if you have some real fundamental struggles, seek people out that can give you counseling and therapy, assistance and help if you need it. I am not that. Try not to be fearful, try not to be embarrassed. There is nothing wrong with seeking help if you need help. I have a counselor. I know in this day and age, it's still difficult for a lot of guys to have a counselor. I have one. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not ashamed of it. I don't refrain from telling people it's an okay thing. If you need a counselor, if you need a therapist, there's nothing wrong with seeking that out. Now, obviously, artist self-care is a huge issue. I'm recording this right now because I got a bunch of lovely feedback in one of the polls that I put out recently. I couldn't fit everything into this, so I'm going to be expanding in the next couple podcasts. One of those is going to be exercise, the importance of physical activity for artists. Obviously very important because we spend a lot of time being stagnant. Another one I'm going to look at is getting outside. I know that the term touch grass gets thrown around, and I really don't mean anything like that in a derogatory sense, but just the beauty of getting outside, of breathing fresh air, of having the sun strike your body, and then also the little benefits of like seeing birds and things like that move around in your world. Another one's going to be a break from technology, and I'm going to keep rolling with this, and I'll be asking for feedback from you. So if you are here at this point in the late portions of the podcast, still listening to this, and you have an additional idea that you would like to see in one of the podcasts, please share it in the comments below. I would love to see that, and I will probably reply to you at this point. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was beneficial. And I am appreciative of your time. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.